Hey there guys, today we're taking a look at Rainbow Six Siege running on the AMD Ryzen 5 5500U. Now we've taken a look at this game on here before, but this time around what I want to do is I want to compare the two render APIs that the game actually supports, because the game supports both Vulkan and DirectX 11. Now I've almost always used the Vulkan rendering API, mostly because AMD used to have performance issues when it came to DirectX 11. It has been a few months now since they've actually updated their drivers to actually have proper DirectX 11 support, so I want to see if anything has changed in terms of which API between the two is actually better. So we're going to be jumping into the built-in benchmark to actually do some comparison testing there. And of course, we're going to be jumping in with DirectX 11 first here, and we are running with the lowest in-game graphics settings. And when you set things to the lowest setting, it pretty much sets the target render resolution to about 50% of the full resolution here. And we are running at the 15-watt stock TDP. And of course, that 50% resolution is being upscaled with TAA. For the most part, on a laptop display, this actually looks perfectly fine, and the level of performance that we get out of here is pretty decent, with 1% lows being in the mid-40s and our averages just being slightly under 60 FPS. And overall, the level of performance that we're getting here with just 8 gigabytes of RAM is more than adequate to really be able to get a at least somewhat decent experience here. This is, of course, a competitive shooter, so I can understand if this isn't enough for you to be able to play comfortably at the 15-watt TDP, but the option is at least there to be able to play like this. And if we compare it to Vulkan, we pretty much get roughly the same level of performance. Really, by the end of the test, there was only a marginal difference between the two. Usually it'll just be 1 to 2 FPS at most. Consistently, Vulkan was the one that would end up being just slightly slower by just 1 or 2 frames, but after multiple runs, it still was just at a range where it would be, for the most part, imperceivable. But this is technically a win for DirectX 11, since after 3 runs on each one, it was consistently the faster one, but again by 1 or 2 frames. Not necessarily enough to really push it over the edge in terms of being a overall better experience, but it is technically a win. But now if we raise the TDP up to 25 watts, we can take a look at what DirectX 11 is running like. And once we're at the 25 watt TDP, the level of performance that we're getting is really nice at this point. 1% lows that are pretty much just slightly under 60 is perfectly fine, and our averages being comfortably above that, being in the 70 range, means that this is going to be a very enjoyable experience for most people, especially if you're gaming with a built-in display on this laptop. If you're hooking it up to an external monitor, it would certainly be nice to be able to get a bit more FPS than this, but still it is going to be a very smooth experience. And playing on my 24-inch 144 Hz display still felt perfectly fine. Really, there was not much to complain about here. And overall, the result that we got was very decent, with the final scores essentially being 1% lows in the lower mid 50s and averages just slightly under 70. Switching over to Vulkan, we end up in the usual scenario that we saw before, where the numbers were practically identical to DirectX 11, with averages and 1% lows being pretty much within 1 to 2 FPS from where we were at before. Overall, the final result does end up being, again with Vulkan being just slightly under DirectX 11 after 3 runs. It was again consistently slower by just that 1 to 2 FPS, but it was really just something where you're not going to perceive a difference. By the end of this specific run here, pretty much the difference was just 1 FPS when it came to the 1% lows and the averages. So at the end of the day, really there is no perceivable difference between the two at all, which is nice to see, because there was a while where Vulkan was consistently the better performer between the two. So the update to the DirectX 11 drivers has been very welcome. And if we jump into some actual gameplay, this is just, of course, with Terrorist Hunt here. We're just running through, and the level of performance that we're getting is more than adequate enough to actually get a decent gaming experience. And there really isn't much to complain about. It certainly would be nice to be able to hit some higher averages and maybe even boost those 1% lows to just be at least 60, but you would be hard pressed to really find much to complain about here. It was a more than enjoyable enough experience, and really overall, I'm pretty happy to see the results here with Vulkan. Everything was perfectly enjoyable, and it was more than adequate levels of performance. But after multiple retries of this specific map on both Vulkan and and DirectX 11. And trust me, it was very annoying to try to do this just because of the fact that the game unfortunately doesn't let you pick specifically which maps or game modes you want to do in this specific game mode. It was just consistently clear that, again, DirectX 11 was actually the higher performer, with the 1% lows just being slightly higher and our averages being, again, also slightly higher. This time around, we're talking about 2 to 3 FPS difference. It's not going to be anything earth-shattering here, but it is something that at least consistently kept the level of performance higher with DirectX 11. And that is something to note here. This is a completely different experience from how it used to be before, where DirectX 11 was just slightly slower than VULKAN. So the fixes that they've done to DirectX 11 are very welcome, specifically in this game. The level of performance that we're getting is more than adequate with both VULKAN and DirectX 11, but it does seem that DirectX 11 consistently does score higher. And when we're talking about FPS that is sometimes reaching below 60, having those extra frames might be the difference between keeping a above 60 FPS average or just being slightly under it. I really think it would be extremely difficult for most people to tell a difference. I think if we just did a blind test to see if anyone would notice a difference between the two, pretty much no one would really consistently be able to get it. I think it would just be kind of down to luck of the draw here, where you got a 50-50 chance on just guessing if it's going to be different or not. So it's certainly not earth-shatteringly different results, but it is something to note here. But anyways, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, be sure to subscribe. If you would like to help support the channel, you can always become a channel member. That would be greatly appreciated. But I'll catch you guys next time.